Hello again everyone, welcome back to my channel and welcome to another speed build video in The Sims 4. I hope you're all having the most amazing day ever so far and thank you so much for joining me here today. We have our first, I would say, official spooky video of the spooky season. I think I've spoken about this on the channel for the last couple of weeks, but spooky season, Halloween, autumn is my favourite time of year, so I really like to do sort of themed videos on my channel around this time of year. I do exactly the same thing with festive / Christmas builds as well, but what I was explaining was during the month of September I tend to do quite autumnal themed builds and videos, and then when October hits, that's when the spooky videos start. So we have our very first, I would class this more of like a spooky build of the season this year, so I'm very excited to be able to share this one with you all. We are building in Forgotten Hollow on this is this a 40 by 30 or is this a 30 by 20? I can't exactly remember. It doesn't look like a 40 by 30, it looks a little bit smaller than that, but anyway, I digress. I was working from a reference image that I did find on Pinterest, so I will pop that on the screen for you now so that you can see that what I was working towards, when I was building this house. And I really tried to make the house as accurate and as close to the photograph as I possibly could. I don't know whether you'll all agree with that or not. However, I do end up changing some of the roofing off camera because I was realizing that this front part in particular was looking a little bit too pointy. So I do end up changing that off camera. I did think that I was filming at the time, but then when I went back to watch the footage back to make sure it was all okay to do the voiceover for, I had realised that I had not actually filmed that portion of the video. So I'll likely point it out to you. Well, I don't know when I'm going to point it out to you, to be fair, because we don't actually revisit the exterior of the property once we finish the interior. But anyway, I digress. So you can see that the shape and the colour scheme and pretty much everything came together relatively quickly, especially considering I am probably one of the most indecisive people on the planet. Usually it takes me quite a long time to figure out colour schemes, usually what I tend to struggle with most, and sort of landing on one that I really enjoy. But with this one, I think because I was working from the reference image and it was all pretty dark, and so I just wanted to sort of stick with that and stick to that. So I do end up just kind of getting it on my first go. I did use a lot of items from the Vampires game pack as well as a lot of items from the Life and Death expansion pack. They worked together beautifully with this particular build and I'm really pleased with how this turned out. It looks very grand, very Addams Family-esque, I would say, on the exterior. And then when it came to the interior, it was quite interesting to me because I knew that I wanted it to be like a creepy house, okay? But I think when I moved on to the interior, things sort of started progressing and I was like, oh, this is more of like a haunted house now. So I think I'm likely going to be calling this like either haunted house or a big haunted family house or something like that. I'm not entirely sure, but I wanted to make sure that if you and your Sims actually wanted to live in this house, you could definitely do that. It's not just for show. It has everything, I think, unless I'm missing something very key, it has everything that I think a Sims family needs to actually get by, to fulfill all of their needs, etc. So yeah, really pleased with how this turned out. You'll have to let me know what your thoughts are in the comments down below, and I'm also thinking about what other builds I would like to release this month. I always do, not always, that was wrong. I think last year, or was it the year before, I released a Happy Halloween house, which I thoroughly enjoyed building, so I'm likely going to do another sort of Happy Halloween house. I have as well been considering decorating an apartment for the Halloween season too, so I might do something like that. I've been considering playing the original Sims Making Magic, doing like a really quick playthrough of that on the channel at some point, like revisiting that after all these years. So I don't know, if you've got any other ideas of what you might want to see, then please drop them down below. I have also been considering building like a horror themed like slasher camp as well, with the introduction of The Sims 4 Adventure Awaits. I think that could be a really fun video to put together as well. So yeah, I do have some ideas, but I am always open to suggestions. So if you have any, then like I said, please drop any comments down below. But you can see that the structure is pretty much set now, and then we do start working on the landscaping. Another thing I think it's worth noting that I do change off camera are the little sort of roofing details as well. I initially was using ones from, I think, the Vampires pack, and I just came to realize that I like to take test screenshots with my builds to make sure that it's a house that I want to continue working on. I don't know if anybody else does this, but I was doing that off camera anyway. I think you could see me doing it very briefly, momentarily, like just a few minutes ago, where I was sort of like pressing the tab key and dropping the camera down to see if I actually liked the build or not. I always take some like test in-game screenshots, and then I'll be like, oh yeah, I do actually like this house, and then I'll keep working on it. But yeah, I did change those little dormers off camera, and then I can't remember if I've also changed the roof at this point. I'm not entirely, oh yes, have I? I'm not entirely sure. It doesn't matter. It's quite a minor thing. But anyway, I just thought it was worth noting. Now, I did use quite a lot of landscaping from, I think, particularly Life and Death. That pack, I knew it was going to work beautifully with this build. Let's be honest. It's possibly one of my favourite expansion packs at this point. I'm not entirely sure, but when that pack was released last year, right? I think they released that pack very, very close to Halloween, and I was actually having a discussion with, I can't remember who it was about this, but I do feel like because Halloween is my favourite time of year, as I was saying at the beginning of the video, and autumn is my favourite season, that just for me made the launch of Life and Death feel that little bit more special. Does that make sense? Did anybody else agree with that, or I don't know, was that just a me thing? Anyway, I do end up trying some other sort of like debug items out here, and I think my thought process with this was, okay, I just sort of want to make it look a little bit unkempt, but not like it's super overgrown sort of thing. I think if I'd had the energy, I possibly would have used the tool mod a little bit more on the exterior of this build to add some like wooden sort of like detailing over some of the windows, etc. But then when you actually look at it, it's quite a grand looking house. It's not necessarily super run down, especially on the exterior, I wouldn't say. Obviously, the landscaping is a little bit overgrown and a little bit unkempt, but apart from that, the house looks like it's in pretty good nick. And then when you move on to the interior, you've got like the mouldy walls and the stains everywhere, and the decor's really outdated and things like that. So I can't wait to show you the interior actually, because it definitely took a direction that I wasn't necessarily thinking that it would, which isn't a bad thing at all, but that's, like I said, when I decided, okay, this is going to be a haunted house. So speaking of the interior, this is when we move on to start working on the floor plan. The floor plan came together, I'd say relatively easily, relatively quickly, and so I haven't even told you how many bedrooms and bathrooms this is either. I do apologise. This is a 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom house. We have a separate living space, which is huge, and then we have a kitchen with a small sort of breakfast table, and then we have a separate dining room as well. We also have a seance room on the ground floor, which I thought was quite a fun idea. And something that I was like, okay, I definitely need to add some sort of like seance situation in this house. So yes, I do add a seance table. I think it's the only one that we actually have from the paranormal stuff pack, which again, I actually used quite a few items from that stuff pack too. That came in very, very handy. And so the first room that we start working on after we've completed all the floor planning is the living room. It took me a little while to sort of work out what colour scheme I wanted to go for in here. I was playing around with a few different ideas, and then everything came together quite organically after I set my head on, right, okay, this is the wallpaper that I'm going to use. And I also end up adding, just speaking of like adding stains on the wall, etc., I think I started doing that, I can't remember which room I started doing it in, and then there are certain elements of it that I've added off camera, so you might not necessarily, sorry, I can speak, I promise I can speak. You might not see me add all of the mould to the stains on the walls, but just know the house is full of it. I wanted this house to look really run down, but as I said, I wanted it to be not necessarily abandoned, but like a family perhaps still lives here. I don't know. But like I was saying at the beginning, I wanted this to be a functional house for you and your Sims to actually enjoy as well during the spooky season, because I feel like with houses that you build that are kind of unkempt and maybe not occupied, they're really fun, of course. But then in terms of gameplay, what can you actually do with them? So I was definitely thinking in my mind, okay, build a haunted house, but make it so that your Sims can actually live here, you know? So I had to find that really sort of interesting balance between the two, which is harder than you may think. But anyway, there are a few things again in here that I do change off camera as well, because when I was taking again my test screenshots to see like what sort of vibe we were going with in here, there were just a few things that I was like, oh no, that needs to be changed for sure. And then this is when I start sort of fiddling around with the lighting as well. So I believe now, if anyone's downloaded this build already, please feel free to correct me. I do not think at any point I had any of the teeny tiny ceiling lights that I usually and typically add to my builds in this house. Every single light in this build is either a side lamp, a chandelier, wall candles, like little candelabras on tables, etc. I really wanted the light to be very organic in this house and just super spooky. I didn't want this house to be really bright, and yeah, I wanted it to have that spooky sort of eerie feel to it, and I thought, what better way to do that than to do it with the lighting? I think that's definitely, in my opinion, the best way to sort of add that eeriness to a build, is definitely play around with your lighting. Is my advice there. There are certain rooms where I start working on them and then I remove the lighting and start adding different types of lighting, and I just think, oh, now it looks good. So you'll have to let me know if that's something that you agree with in the comments down below. But I also add these like night statues on either side of the house as well, just to give it that sort of grand feeling. And then I did contemplate with the idea of adding some pumpkins in here to make it a little bit more Halloween-y. And then it was giving the vibe of like, this is a house that you would pay to take a walk around, or you'd pay to spend the night here. And as I've said twice already, that is not the vibe that I wanted to go for with this house, so I do end up removing the pumpkins. I think off camera, I do change this flower bouquet as well on the mantelpiece, because that, like, fresh flowers in a house like this, just, it wasn't, I'm not saying you can't do that at all, that's fine if you want to do that, but for me, that just wasn't the vibe that I wanted to go for with this house. I wanted it to be a little bit dusty, a little bit moldy, just a little bit unkempt, and possibly like the family just haven't moved furniture in decades. You know. So anyway, so the living room is pretty much done. I don't think we revisit that at any point. If we do, it is just to make some very minor changes. I think nearer the end, I do end up putting up, I think, a different like framed artwork that I ended up finding in the catalogue, and I was like, oh, that'd look really good in the living room. So I think we nip back in there at some point at the end of the video, but that's that room done. And then we do start working on the dining room here. I think with a house like this, the pressure's off, really, you know, with furniture placement. I don't think it necessarily has to make, not the most sense, of course it has to make sense. Oh, I don't know what I'm trying to say here, but I think it can be a little less uniform. Things don't necessarily need to match all that much. And yeah, it just allowed me to be a little bit more free, I guess, with the item placement and the colour schemes and such. So that was quite refreshing, and another reason that I love building spooky houses in The Sims. And this is just signalling to me that spooky season has finally arrived. I am so excited. If you are new to the channel, then that's something that you now know about me. If you are a returning viewer, then you'll likely already know that this is my favourite time of year. So anyway, very excited. Also, I don't know if you can hear, but I have my dog in my office with me while I'm filming this, which I usually wouldn't do. But since I started working from home, my little dog Harley has been very much like my dog. I mean, he is my dog, and he always has been, but he really loves just being in this room with me. Whereas before, he'd always want to be he'd always want to be downstairs with my husband. Whereas now it's really sweet because I think he just wants to spend all of his time with me, which I am not going to complain about for 1 second. So if you hear like little noises when he's sleeping or when he's getting comfy and he's happy, he makes like little grumbly noises. So I've just heard him make one. So if you heard that, I do apologize, but he is in the office with me. Anyway, the dining room is done because I pretty much just bumbled along through that, and then we do start working on the seance room. So I do end up changing the lighting in here to more of like a green toned lighting, which I just think added to the whole vibes in here. And I'm really glad I added this room, to be completely honest, because I usually in a house like this, I would have put a back porch on the house, and then this would have been a through room with a back door leading out to the back porch. Whereas with this house, I didn't actually add a back porch, which is quite unusual for me, to be honest. But I'm really glad that I didn't add a back porch, because it means that this room is just of its own entity, as it were, within the house. I'm talking nonsense, as always. But anyway, that's that room done. That came together super quickly. And then the last room... No, this is not the last room. I was going to say, this is the last room on the ground floor. That is not true. We've still got the kitchen to do. But then I do move on to the entrance here. Now, this little vase... from one of the kits. Oh no, I cannot. I think it's the artist kit. There's a swatch where it looks like the flowers are dying and there's petals sort of like all along, like underneath the vase. So I used that quite a few times in this build because I thought, well, I want to add some sort of plantage, some sort of foliage to this build, but I didn't want it to be like really fresh, like green plants in here, because that just wouldn't make any sense. So that came in super handy, and that's that done. And now we move on to the kitchen. Now I'm going to be honest, the kitchen I was dreading doing, which is why I'm doing it last on the ground floor. However, I was like, no, I'm going to make this a good kitchen, a good spooky kitchen. And you know what? This is possibly one of my favourite rooms in the house. I'm not even joking. And if someone had said to me, when you start building this house, one of your favourite rooms is going to be the kitchen, I'd have been like, ha ha ha, whatever. No, seriously. I adore this kitchen. I love how it came together. It was giving, I don't know if anyone's familiar with the game Phasmophobia, but there's one of the farmhouses that you play in, and it was giving like a Phasmophobia farmhouse kitchen, and I loved that so much about this room. But as you can see, I still have like the teeny tiny saucer light overhead. So right now it's not looking too spooky, but in just a moment I remove that and then start adding candles. And yeah, like here look. So I've removed that entirely now, and it just changes the entire vibe of the room. Like, I genuinely think it changes the entire vibe. And something else that I end up adding as well to, I think, pretty much every room are the cobwebs from, I'm pretty sure they're from the Vampires game pack. Now, they are a staple for me. If I'm ever building like a spooky house, I'll always add cobwebs, because when you're in, is it live mode or is it live mode? Have we like ascertained which one it is? Anyway, when you're in live mode, there are spiders that populate the cobwebs, so there are spiders crawling in the cobwebs, which I thought was so cool. So in some of the screenshots, I think you can see the spiders at the end of the video. I'm not entirely sure. And speaking of screenshots, I've been thinking about this for quite some time on my channel as well, because I am doing more like on-camera builds and challenges and stuff like that, which I adore doing. And then I also still love doing my speed builds with the voiceovers. But what I was going to say was, how do we feel as a collective about screenshots? Like the tour of the house at the end, screenshots. How do we feel about them? Or would you prefer if I did like an actual real-time overview of the house and talk you through sort of not what I was thinking, because that's done in the voiceover, but which would you prefer? Do you prefer screenshots, or would you prefer like a real-time walkthrough? Drop me a comment down below and let me know, because I'm doing a little, not an experiment, because it's not an experiment, but I'd be just really interested to see what everybody's thoughts on that. But anyway, that's the kitchen done, and then we move on to the upper floor here, and the first room that we work on is the main bedroom. Now with this bedroom, I think out of all of them, it's not my least favourite by any stretch of the imagination, But typically my main bedrooms are not too creative, I think is maybe the word. But I think because this is a heavily themed build, I do like this one a little bit more because I was able to do a little bit more with it. Or at least I thought so. And then I also did consider giving this particular room an ensuite, so using the bay window there as an ensuite, but then I was like, it'd have been a bit of a tight squeeze trying to fit in a toilet, a sink and a shower. And then I was like, with an older house like this, I don't know whether an ensuite would have been too common, or I'm not entirely sure. Also, if you just heard my throat gargle, no you didn't. You absolutely did. I just took a sip of water. I took a break because I'd been talking non-stop for nearly 20 minutes, which is very unlike me. Usually I'll do like 10-minute batches and then I'll sort of just start mid-sentence or whatever. I'll just edit it in. But I just took a sip of my drink and then my throat gargled as I started speaking. So sorry if you had to hear that. I think you'll only likely hear it if you listen to these voiceovers with headphones on. And I'm not sure how many people do that. I don't know if that's something that people actually do, but yeah, I just thought I'd mention it because I don't want people thinking, Rachel, what on earth was that noise? It was my throat. Anyway, this room is nearly done. There's really not much going on in here, but again, wanted to make it a functional space. And I love the fact that I added that little fireplace from the Adventure Awaits pack. I thought that fit in so beautifully in that bedroom. Then we move on to the second bedroom, which I did decide was going to be a nursery. And there's one screenshot at the end where there's this light sort of flooding in through the windows. There's rain outside. There's the candle light just behind the cot here. And it looked so beautiful. And I was like, I am so glad that I decided to turn this room into a nursery. I really am. It has a bit of an ominous feel to it, but I didn't mean for it to. I did not mean for this room to have that ominous feel, but for some reason it does, and I'm not entirely sure why. I mean, maybe it's because it's a nursery, but it's a little bit creepy as well, you know? Like there's a creepy doll next to the cot, for example, you know? Why would there not be? I think I added that doll in the living room, in this room, and then in the twin kids bedroom, which is the last bedroom that we work on. But I added them in different swatches because I didn't want to have the same doll. But yeah, I'm not entirely sure what's going on with those dolls and what their prerogative is, what their plan is, but thought it was worth mentioning. And just as a disclaimer, they are from the paranormal stuff pack as well. I think they're from the debug menu. But yeah, they're from the paranormal stuff pack. I don't know in terms of gameplay what they actually do, what they offer, if your Sims can even interact with them at all. I'm really not sure. But they're so creepy, honestly. I love them so much. They are definitely possessed. Like, think Annabelle. If you're familiar with the film Annabelle, think Annabelle. Yeah, that's sort of what I was going with. But this is when I start adding some detailing to the walls, which is, I'm not sure if that's something that I've shown so far within any of the footage, but each and every room has a lot of different detailing on these walls because I really wanted to give this house that super rundown look and feel and everything like that. And they just added to the vibe so much. And just for full disclaimer as well, I end up using a few different wall decals from, I think, Vampires as well as For Rent, because like that's what you can sort of see, like it's sort of like dripping from the walls. That's from For Rent, which just makes it so eerie. And that painting as well, I want to say, is that from For Rent as well? It's so ominous. Like that woman is, honestly, when I saw it in the catalogue, I didn't even realise that swatch was available when I found it. And I added it in the kitchen, I believe. I was like, oh, that's also very creepy. I do end up adding a fireplace in this room as well, but it is a different fireplace to a fireplace that we've seen in any of the rooms so far. I thought that was relatively realistic for an older house like this because there's every chance that this house could be hundreds of years old. Yeah, so there's every chance that a family's come in here at some point and put in a new fireplace, but that fireplace is just newer than perhaps the one in the living room, for example, or the one in the bedroom. So I did end up adding this fireplace here, and then I also added this same fireplace into the twin bedroom as well, which I thought was quite a nice idea. Now, something that I do end up adding in this room as well is a little bassinet, a little cot, a little crib, whatever you want to call it. I'm not really sure why I did that. In truth, I was perhaps thinking that maybe the eldest child lived here for a while, and they brought their child to live with them in here. Is maybe what I was thinking. I just thought it just adds a little bit of a slightly different family dynamic than what I'm used to adding. So that's when that little bassinet goes in as well. And then the last bedroom that we work on is the twin room. So I always add a twin room in a creepy house like this, and I tend to use this base game bed pretty much wherever, whenever I'm doing one of these bedrooms as well. Look, it's from the base game, but they just have this incredibly sort of, they're not eerie or anything like that, but they just look very old. They almost look, I was going to say Edwardian, but I'm saying words now for saying words' sake, so I'm just gonna, that's not accurate at all. They look old is basically what I was trying to say, but that's when the other fireplace goes in here too. We've got a grandfather clock in here. There's a super old, like, weathered rug underneath the beds as well, and this chest of drawers, again from base game, because it looks all beaten up. I think I use that in every single one of these bedrooms. Not too realistic, but it's really the only one that I could think that would fit in a creepy house like this. And while I was decorating this room, actually, I was having a thought. Not that they ever would, because they wouldn't, but if the Sims team ever asked me to collaborate on a kit, again, it's never going to happen. I'm just saying the words, okay? I would love to collaborate on a kit where you have like items for a spooky or / haunted house, you know, like dead plants and crooked picture frames and just like stuff like that. I would absolutely just love it. A clock that's the face is broken on it, you know. It would be amazing, because when I'm decorating a house like this, if you've got a lot of packs, it's relatively simple and straightforward to achieve the look that we've gone for here. But that's because I have all the packs. You know, there's many people that don't have all the packs, so it would be quite hard to achieve this look. But if we had a dedicated kit and or stuff pack, I mean, we've got the stuff pack with paranormal. So if it was a stuff pack, for me, it would need to have a lot of gameplay elements in it as well. But let's just say it was a kit. I would love for it to be like a haunted / spooky house kit. Oh, it would be so good. Like candles everywhere. There'd be more cobwebs, more stains for the walls, like creepy toy boxes and possessed dolls. And like I said, wonky picture frames and broken clocks. Just that would be so good. Anyway, like I said, never gonna happen, but I can dream. Anyway, so this bedroom is pretty much done. And then, look, the doll's going in again, but just in a different swatch. I'm just saying, she's making her way around this house, is that doll. Oh, my goodness. So creepy. And then we move on to the bathrooms. So these bathrooms are pretty much identical to one another, but I did decide to keep the footage in the video anyway, because I thought some people might appreciate the process of seeing me try and decorate a creepy, moldy, haunted, potentially bathroom. So yeah, but like I said, both bathrooms are pretty much identical. So of course, going in with the stains on the walls again, because let's be honest, if you've got wallpaper in a bathroom, there's going to be some damp getting under that wallpaper, and it's not going to stay pristine for very long, is it? So yeah. It was difficult for me to try and sort of conceptualize a haunted bathroom, but I did my best with what I had. Okay, so but lucky for you, we're at the end of the video. So if you would like to download this house from the gallery, it's available right now. My origin ID is RachelPedd. Tray files, as always, are linked down in the description box just below. You can get them from SimFileShare. But thank you so much, everyone, for joining me here today. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope we're going to have the creepiest, spookiest, best October ever. But you all take care, and I will see you all again very, very soon. Bye!